Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. I am Lindsay Vellicina with Scrum.org, and today I have the pleasure of having Sander Durb with me from the Netherlands. He's one of our professional Scrum trainers, and he is here to answer any Scrum questions that you have. So let's get through some very quick housekeeping items here. So your microphones will be muted throughout. This session is being recorded, and it will be made available as a podcast after this session within 24 hours. So please keep an eye out for that. We don't really have any slides for this session. It's really going to be strictly Q&A. So please start populating your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can utilize the chat feature for any technical questions that you have. So very quickly, who's Scrum.org? We are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009, and our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. We offer training and certification in professional Scrum. And as I mentioned earlier, Sander Durb is one of our professional Scrum trainers, and we hope that this session plays a part in your continuous learning journey. We have a lot of free resources on our website. Feel free to check those out. Other webinars and things to help you with your growth. And I hope this webinar helps with that too. So with that, I will hand it over to Sander to introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Well, this happy schmug in the picture, that would be me, working at Xebia, company in the Netherlands, now expanding globally. My official title is a lead agile consultant and obviously a professional Scrum trainer for Scrum.org, which basically means as much that I talk the entire day. I live in the Netherlands, as Lindsay mentioned, together with my wife, 3 kids, 2 cats, and we recently welcomed a puppy into our home. So I'm on the absolute bottom of the food chain. So I'm happy to be here to share some of my stuff, and hopefully people will listen. I teach these classes currently. Next to this, I have a podcast called Mastering Agility, and there is a Discord community linked to that. I'll put the link to the Discord community in the chat in a minute that you can join. I'm an avid writer on both Medium and the Scrum.org profile, where I share my blogs as well. And you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Sander Durb.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sander. And let's jump into our questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. And we actually have some questions that came in already before this session. So please continue to populate your questions. I'm going to pull some questions that came in yesterday, actually, in advance of the session. So there's some questions that came in from Scott about the definition of done. And this first one is, does the definition of done always include everything required to push new functionality to production, regardless of whether you believe all of it can be accomplished within the sprint? Or should it be realistic, only including everything that can be completed within the sprint with the goal of continually improving? In this scenario, admittedly, there would be more to do to push to production that would occur after the sprint completes. So want to talk through this, Sander?
Yeah, I think this is a very awesome layered question. Technically, looking from a professional Scrum perspective, looking at the Scrum Guide, what the Scrum Guide says is that the definition of done means that the increments technically should be able to go to production. There should no more work be left remaining in order to go to production. Having said that, I appreciate the fact that there is a big difference between professional picture perfect Scrum and how the actual world operates. So I was recently in the same situation where one of my teams I was working with could not go to production because they had some sign off when it comes to QA, for instance, somewhere down the line in the organization because that's company policy. This has a lot to do with the self-managing ability. What you want to do in that sense is aim to create a short as possible feedback loop and try to get the autonomy as much as possible, and maybe base your release schedule on that. So if you have one of these sign-offs, for instance, same as the situation with Scott, if there's one of those things hampering you, maybe you want to base your release schedule on that. So put as much as you can out there and try to get this, work with this as a dependency.
That's great advice.
Great advice, making it very hard. And I would do advise to try to get as much of that into the actual hands of the team itself. How much can we actually reasonably do,
Right.
and how much, from a Scrum Master perspective, how much do we need to spend on the organizational advice to move that more towards the team and that decision making?
Right. Okay.
Hope that helps, Scott.
Yes, hope that helps. So this next question from Rima. I am a software engineer and I newly was assigned as the sole Scrum Master for my current sprint. I don't know what to do or how to help. So what advice would you give to Rima?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, you're newly appointed as a sole Scrum Master. You're there sort of out of the blue without the experience. At least that's what I get from this question. And if you have a different perspective, Lindsay, feel free to give me more on that.
That's what it seems like from reading this.
Yeah. So where to start? Oh, wow. This is, if you're not trained in this, for instance, or don't know where to start, I would advise starting with observing. Don't go into action mode right away. Look at the 8 choices a Scrum Master has, being point north, uphold Scrum, train, mentor, facilitate, coach, actively do nothing, my personal favorite, and uphold Scrum. And just start observing from that point. See what you can do, see where you might have some specific observations that you want to run by the rest of your Scrum team, but don't go into that action mode right away, because you'll feel like the Scrum police while you might not understand the underlying implications or reasoning behind it. So start with observing, write some stuff down, and create a little bit of an action plan based on that. Bring it back to the team, relating back to self-management and transparency and so on. And then start sharing your observations on what you and your team might need. Hope that helps.
That's really great advice. It's good to observe what's going on in order to know how to engage. So this next question, this person would like to ramp up their retrospectives. What do you suggest to keep everyone engaged and not falling asleep?
First and foremost, coming in there with curiosity, what is happening now that is causing people to be disengaged and to fall asleep? I think that's one of the predominant curiosities that I would have. Do they understand what the retrospective is for? Do you know what kind of things are being discussed? And then go from that point on. Maybe reteach again, put out the purpose of the sprint retrospective. The time box being 3 hours for a full month of sprint, usually a little less for shorter sprints, and that you discuss individuals, interactions, processes, tools, and the definition of done. Now, especially the latter one is something that I rarely see being discussed in the retrospective. Having said that, you can use techniques like teaching from the back of the room, having developers facilitate, liberating structures, and so on to make this more engaging and more spicy. Hopefully that gives you something to start off with.
Great. Thank you, Sander. So this next question, so there's a lot open to interpretation here, but I think you might have some tips for this. Could you please explain some ways to improve the health of a product backlog?
Some ways to improve the health of a product backlog. Oh, where to start? First and foremost, check whether a proper product goal is in place. So that's a commitment to the artifact of the product backlog. Do we know what we're advancing towards? Something that we discuss in our conference talk, Current Tense, there's always a next sprint. is that you create marshmallow backlogs if you don't know what the direction is and the goal that you're trying to achieve. And therefore, maybe a lot of things can be put in the product backlog that do not contribute to the achievement of product or sprint goals. And therefore, stuff is being randomly put on there while we do not know what kind of value it adds. Always refer to this, and that gives you something to plan against with emergent work as well. So maybe a stakeholder comes in during the sprint and says, this is super important, we need to have it done right away. Then you can map this against the product goal or the sprint goal and say, all right, this does not contribute, so we're not going to do this, or this does contribute, but not right now, so it's going to be on the lower end in the backlog. And the more that you work, the more that the work is related to the current state or the near future, the more details you want to put in. So the more time you want to invest in backlog refinement. That is something that has been useful to me in the past. So hopefully this gives you something to work with.
Great, thank you so much. This next question here from Jim is about estimation. So what might be the consequences of choosing an hourly time-based size estimation rather than Fibonacci or t-shirt sizing? How might this affect team behavior and morale?
Morale, I'm not sure, because that's super dependent on the situation. The thing with an hourly time-based estimation is that you go into the trap of exact estimation. So you say this product backlog item, we're going to finish that in 3.5 hours, just calling a random number out. The probability of this exactly being done in 3.5 hours is super low. That's why it's called an estimation. If I would go to Google Maps and say or check how long it takes to drive from my home to Rome, it says 16 hours and 40 minutes. Very exact number, timely estimation as well. But the probability and the chances of me exactly arriving there in 16 hours and 40 minutes is minimal to none. Maybe have some bio breaks in between, maybe an accident happened, I have to charge my car, maybe I want to stop and do some scenic checks. You know, there are so many dependencies and factors and variables that might influence the exact number. So whether that's my drive to Rome or the work that you're trying to predict in this case, and how fast you can do this, the likelihood of you not achieving that in that time is really high. Relating this to Fibonacci sequence or to any other size, time would be one of them. You have time, for instance, but complexity, unknown factors, unpredicted work. Maybe it's really easy to pull off, but it just takes a lot of time, or maybe the other way around. Maybe you have dependencies on technology, people there are not present, and so on. So this makes it an estimation. An exact hour estimation tries to normalize that stuff and does not take into account all these other variables. And that makes it a really big pitfall to not work with estimation and the emergent nature of product backlog refinement as such.
That's great advice. There are a few questions here that kind of tie to this in a way. This question from James: what is the best way to handle rollover items if not completed at the end of a sprint? If the story is partially completed, should the estimate be updated for the remaining work?
No, because it's not done. So there are a couple of things in here, but let's address the latter one. Should it be should the estimate go into the next sprint? The work is not done, so therefore, if you pull in the story into the next sprint, the work or the estimate does not go. For instance, your velocity or in that reporting, if you will, you just re-estimate and see how to move from that point on. I appreciate the fact that there has been work done, so maybe half of the work has been done. Doesn't mean that half of those story points go into your report, because there is no real value in that report. Velocity, for instance, in this case, is more of a tool to support your forecast for the coming sprint.
Right.
Don't focus on getting those details looking back too much, because there's nothing that you can change looking back. There's more value in looking forward. All right, maybe we had some spillover into the next sprint. What do we do? What do we need to do with it? Is it still valuable? What happened that it that is there that we're having spill over? Do we need to do anything with it? Do we maybe need to put it back in the product backlog and reorder it? Maybe we can take it out because we have new emergent insights, but don't blindly spill over. Lindsay, if I'm not mistaken, there were some other aspects to the question. Could you repeat those for me?
Yes. So if the story is partially completed, should the estimate be updated for the remaining work? You already answered that. And what is the best way to handle those rollover items?
Yeah, so that summing that back up, you do a re-estimate at the end of the sprint based on the remaining work. Don't put that work that has been performed in the last velocity because the story or the product backlog item itself is not done. Then recheck, does this item still hold any value, and where do we need to order it? But don't blindly take it into the next sprint.
And then a follow-on question that dovetails into this is, what is the best practice for pulling sprint backlog items into the sprint after the sprint has started? Is this acceptable if necessary?
Fun question. There are no best practices in agile and emergent work.
Right.
Why? Because your situation might be vastly different from mine, and therefore there is no best. There are good practices, but there's never a best, because a best would more infer that there is a methodology that we need to follow, but that's more in the semantics. If new work emerges, check whether it, for instance, if it's what happened today in our situation, there was a production interrupting issue that was going on. That's obviously something that we immediately need to jump on so that we can take that, that we can continue production. Most important thing. If that is not that situation, see if that work is needed to achieve the sprint goal, and then check if you can do it with the current state of the sprint backlog. So if we take this in, do we still have the do we feel confident that we can still pull off the sprint goal, or do we need to take something out? If not, does it not contribute to our sprint goal? Just order it somewhere in the product backlog. But definitely this is acceptable. The sprint goal is something that we commit to, but the sprint backlog, so the scope itself, is not fixed, it's not written in stone. And that's why you want to have that flexibility and the agility to work with in order to deliver more value.
Okay, great. This next question, we'll do one more kind of estimation question, then we'll go into some done stuff. So can you help with a real life example of story point assignment or relative estimate? Someone's looking for like an example.
Ooh, that's a good question without going into confidentiality.
Keep it general.
You know what I usually do with a real life scenario, in this case it's my training, is it's a nice way to practice this. So I would, you can do this on a mural board or a Miro or an actual physical board, and I would write some stuff down. Like for instance, a cat, a flamberge, a pizza, a remote control, and some other items. And my goal that I convey to them is I want you guys to throw these objects 1 meter, hypothetically. I don't care if they land after a meter, whether that's a meter 50, as long as they cross that meter mark. Other than that, I'm good. And then do some estimation based on the Fibonacci sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. You will see that they will rapidly start slapping on numbers without considering, do we understand what the objects are? Do we understand how much complexity is, how much time it would take, what kind of dependencies do we have? And putting it in such a perspective takes out the perspective of their work because they're biased towards their work, but it gives it a whole different perspective. Identify the easiest object to throw a meter and then start relating everything to that one. They can use the numbers multiple times, but for instance, with a cat, I write them with capitals on purpose because I do not mean a cat like a living animal. I mean a caterpillar machine, like one of those heavy duty machines. But they'll immediately start saying, well, the cat's going to scratch me. Well, why? What kind of assumptions do you have? Well, it's a living animal. No, that's not what I meant. But because you're biased, because you go into so many assumptions right away, because that's the way that we think, they'll be open in their, they have eye openers and thinking, maybe this is something that we need to do with our work as well. go through it properly, discuss what this means, what we think it means, and whether we are on the same page. This is something that I have experienced helps a lot in making this more transparent and how to use this kind of estimation. Not necessarily work items related, but it's a creative way and it has a bit of a funny gimmick to it. And that helped me personally. Hope this helps you too.
Great, thank you. Just a little announcement for our attendees here. So it looks like some of you dropped some questions into the chat. If you could please move them to the Q&A panel, that would be really helpful because then we can capture them, and then any questions that we do not get to, we can share with Sander after this. So please make sure you move your questions from the chat into the Q&A. Okay, so this question, so from Jamie. So speaking of definition of done, do you have any suggestions for a process that the team can follow to make sure every story meets the definition of done?
Great question. Good to see you here, Jamie. Jamie has an awesome podcast as well, Scrum Masters of the Universe. So check out her podcast as well. A process that the team can follow to make sure every story meets the definition of done. Now, there's a little nuance that not necessarily every story has to meet the definition of done, but the increment itself that has been created should meet the definition of done. So maybe have very code-heavy product backlog items, let's say some Java. If there's something related to UX work in your definition of done, you don't have to specifically get that stuff related to Java. So you want to make sure that the increment itself adheres to the definition of done, and there's no specific process. Just start small. Think about how, with the current state of skills that we have in the current team composition, what kind of activities do we need to perform in order to make sure that we deliver proper quality. And you can check out the definition of done eco cycle by Chi-Hong Xia. It's based on liberating structures, and it's a nice way to start to have you think about how to improve your definition of done. But by all means, do not go into individual story level, minimal product backlog item, task level definition of done, because that's going to create a big leeway for you to really get stuff done. But think about the increment, and as long as the increment is adhering to the definition of done, then you're good.
Great, thanks. And this question is about sprint review. Should only the done items be shared during this meeting? What are the cons of showing those that are almost done?
There is no value in items that are almost done. So just show what has been done. And so I've seen teams go through individual items, just show the increments, make transparent the current state of the product, how the new increment is working together with all the previous increments, but don't go into individual items. Personally, I don't think there's a lot of value in going through these items we have done through this sprint. Put the product, the new part of the product, in the hands of the customer, of the stakeholders, as much as you can, and that's where the value is. That's where you want to get your feedback from. Maybe if there are some things that you have learned in the past sprint that influence the way that you work with your stakeholders, sure, that's something that you want to go through, maybe on a specific story, minimal product backlog item level. But there's no value in showing stuff that's half done, because the stakeholders cannot use that. And then you're spending a whole lot of time, and maybe questions like, yeah, why is this not done? Well, you forecasted this, so it doesn't add any value. There's no point in discussing stuff that's not done.
Great, thanks. There are a few questions that are coming in around metrics. What metrics can we use for the Scrum team? Velocity is not much of a help.
Come again?
This question was, what are the metrics we can use for a Scrum team, just in general? Velocity is not much of a help. Do you want to just talk about metrics in general? Because I think there's a few questions that had come in about different metrics.
Sure. The first thing that I always point to when it's about metrics is check out the evidence-based management framework. So I created as well by Scrum.org, and it talks about 4 areas. 4 key value areas being current value, unrealized value, ability to innovate, and time to market. And there are numerous suggested metrics that you can use. It doesn't show exactly how to implement those, but it gives you a very easy way to start off with measuring stuff. And it says a lot more about the actual value. I was talking to this big retailer in the US a couple of weeks ago when I asked them, what do you define as value, for instance? And they said, well, whether things have been delivered on time and within budget. This does not hold any value, but how do you make that value then transparent? How do you measure value? How do you ensure that you know that you're actually doing the right stuff and that you learn something that you can improve from? I've been working with large organizations in the past where I've implemented evidence-based management and just started off with a couple of very easy things to measure. For instance, the employee satisfaction and the stakeholder satisfaction based on a scale from 1 to 10. That was the current value. Checked some unrealized value. So what's the desired state if the out of a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the best? Currently, the stakeholder satisfaction is a 6, and they would be happy with an 8. You can have a discussion like, what do we need to get from a 6 to an 8? What kind of activities, what kind of features would you need for us to get to a state of an 8 for the product itself? And from that point, you can start measuring or checking, take some actions, putting in place other metrics. So if we were to get from a 6 to 8, maybe we need to do something about our ability to innovate. Maybe we need to speed up our ability to deliver. Maybe we need to get to production faster. So create a bigger release cycle, a faster release cycles. How fast are we able to learn? So we get some feedback from our stakeholders and from our users. How long does it take so that we can actually implement these kind of lessons? The evidence-based management framework to me makes it very easy and transparent to start measuring stuff in a very low-key way without overwhelming the stakeholders right away. And I think it's super useful to put these metrics out in your sprint review as well. Really relating this back to the previous question on undone work. These metrics would be more useful to actually demonstrate and discuss during your sprint review together with the increment, and you create a very powerful dynamic in the sprint review. It's more of a relationship-based thing than just for the stakeholders to sit back, soak up the knowledge that you're trying to demo. So it's not becoming just a demo, it's actually becoming a very interactive working session based on these metrics as well, because it gives us something tangible and not gut feeling to work with. So hopefully it gives you guys something as well to start working with, to start measuring with, and I can highly recommend it. There's a lot in the Professional Agile Leadership Evidence-Based Management course as well on this, which I can recommend as well, digging into.
Yes, this is great. I dropped a link for the audience as well to some resources that we have on our website about EBM, including the EBM guide. So feel free to check those out and have a look at those metrics and guidelines. So couple questions here around kind of geared toward the new Scrum Master. So I'm gonna kind of list all 3 of these, Sander, and you could probably have like a collective answer for these. So what would be your advice for a beginner Scrum Master?
Mm-hmm.
And then this next one is, instead of a question on how to solve something, I would like to know more about you. How would you approach the training of new people to become a Scrum Master? Do you follow a certain plan or tailor it to the person's need? Okay,
let's start off with the first one by Victor. What would your advice be for a beginning Scrum Master, right? Yes. My advice is something that I measured before in this webinar. Start observing. Usually the first thing that I do in the new assignment or advise beginning Scrum Masters to do is just sit back a bit and observe what's going on, and as well as things that are not going on. What do you see is happening? What kind of things do you hear are being mentioned? And how does this relate to the body language that people are having? So this gives you more input on the levels of psychological safety, for instance, or go through the product backlog and see the current state of things. Just observe, list your observations. Also go on walks with your with your team, with your stakeholders, and see how they feel about the current state of development, about the current state of the product, about the current state of the team. But usually what I've experienced is that people, when people are taken outside of the regular workspace, they're more inclined to talk in a more of a free mind, because they might feel a little bit limited to discuss any kind of things that they might be able to do so outside. So observe and take walks with individual people. My advice for beginning Scrum Masters.
That's great. All right.
What's the next one?
The next one was around training new people to become a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
Do you follow a certain plan or tailor it to the person's need?
So 2 things. A, take the PSM course. I think that's one of the most fundamental things. This sounds a little bit like selling our own stuff, but it's actually true. And that's the same, because as a Scrum Master, you're a leader in a certain leadership position in the organization. And I don't mean leadership as a manager. A manager could be a leader, but a Scrum Master is a leader, product owner is a leader. But you cannot lead if you don't know how to lead and what to lead in. You cannot lead something that you do not understand. So take a course, understand what the framework is about. I've seen Scrum Masters that jump in out of the blue and have no clue how the Scrum framework works. So take a minute, take a couple of days, invest that time in taking this journey on. Now, other than that, there's a difference between what I see as teaching in the professional environment as well as mentoring. Usually, mentoring is a combination of coaching, from having the other person find his or her own answers, as well as me conveying my experience. This is what I've done. Maybe this helps for you too. And do a little bit of teaching, like what I would do in a professional Scrum Master course. This is how the Scrum framework works. So it's a combination of both. From that point, I would start seeing individual needs, because there is no tailored approach. Maybe your ability to retain knowledge or retain and apply the lessons that I give you might be vastly different from what I would tell Lindsay. No offense, Lindsay, but there might be a discrepancy in there. So based on that, I would tailor my approach to the individual needs of the person that I'm working with.
That makes a lot of sense. Everyone has different contexts.
Exactly.
So this next question also dives into Scrum Master stuff. What are the challenges faced by a Scrum Master, and how can you resolve these challenges? So maybe list like a few common things that come up that a Scrum Master has to work to resolve.
The biggest challenge usually is, what do you do all day? What does a Scrum Master do? How can make this transparent and make this measurable? Well, it's really hard to make measurable. Like, you cannot tell the exact amount of code or quality code that has been delivered. Making measurable the effect of a Scrum Master or the success of a Scrum Master is by measuring the growth and the success of the wider Scrum team, and the successful delivery of the product. I think that's the biggest challenge. As well as another challenge that I see is that many Scrum Masters are just limited to work with the Scrum team itself and not beyond those boundaries. Whereas a Scrum Master is accountable for working and coaching and guiding the entire organization, the wider organization, in the adoption and working with the Scrum framework. So be that managers that are still in position, that are struggling to wrap their heads around what is my current role in relation to the new Scrum team, stakeholders who want to know how to engage with the Scrum team. Should we stay out? Should we just approach them? How do we work with this? But also defining what we see as self-management. Many organizations that I've worked with sort of chuck the bucket when it comes to autonomy. They say, well, you're now a Scrum team and you're autonomous, so good luck with that. And it's the same with when I teach my kids to ride a bike. I cannot give them a bicycle without proper training wheels and say, good luck, see you, grandma, because it's gonna be a horrible show, and they will never want to ride their bike again. And that's the same with autonomy. If that autonomy is not being discussed, and what do we mean, and guide them into a state of self-management, they will fall, they will fail, and they will point the fingers at Scrum, say Scrum doesn't work here. No, if you're not going to get the proper foundation, no, then you're going to build a house on quicksand. That's not going to work. So those are a few common challenges that I see as a Scrum Master.
Yes, definitely. And there's another question here that came in around the whole self-management, self-organization topic. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you balance between self-organization and supporting a team depending on the maturity level of the team?
Yes.
What do you recommend?
Yeah. What do I recommend? All right, cool. A couple of things here. This is where the work of a Scrum Master becomes really tricky and requires you to have your interpersonal antennas, if you will. You got to be very responsive to what's being said, what's not being said, how the Scrum team works, and how to convey messages and how to coach and guide them. There's a very nice exercise in the Professional Scrum Master and the Product Owner deck as well in the course, is to define what you see as a really good operator, really characteristics of a really good team. So if you do this with your team, what do we define as self-management? What do we define as being a really good team? How would we like our inter-team culture to be? And you have something of a goal to measure yourself against. How far are we off from that desired state? How far are we off from our definition of being a very good team? And then you can start working on that. And don't, as my colleague Tom always nicely puts it, don't try to boil the ocean. Start small. Start defining small steps. And again, how do you get from 6 to an 8 and from an 8 to a 10 and so on? How do we create our A team without instantly trying to transform from today over tomorrow? Start small, make that snowball effect, and ultimately that's going to generate so much more power and skin in the game, if you will, than just throwing this overboard. So from now on, you're self-managing. Enjoy.
That's great. Thank you. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about goals. So how do you help your product owner determine a sprint goal when your sprint backlog is a long list of unrelated work items? This is an infrastructure team that focuses on website reliability.
Interesting. So I bet there is a correlation that you can find. What do we define as reliability? How do we want that to look like? What's the, do we maybe have any service level agreements, for instance, that are being put into place? And how far are we off from those? Bring your customers into that conversation and start working. What's the most important thing? Do we need to work on? I don't know, loading speed optimization, lowering the amount of heavy pictures that is being used, and so on. And then start working from that point on. Then it's more effectively, that gives you more leverage to start working with. I'll give you a different example. I used to work with a very large sports equipment retailer, let's keep it at that. And they were building really awesome dashboards that were used by many physical stores as well as the online store. And one of their parts was the reliability and such, and the loading speed of the dashboard. And they were struggling with this as well. Like the backlog was a little bit incohesive, if you will. And the product owner came in and he discussed the objective that he would like to have received by the end of the sprint. He said, I would like the loading speed to be 80% faster by the end of the sprint. And obviously 80% is very ambitious. And then the developers started asking questions and starting to relate this back to the product backlog and what they think is achievable within the sprint. And ultimately they pulled in some work and they said, well, dear product owner, we don't think we can do 80%. We think we can do 10. And the product owner was challenging back a little bit. We need to get more. 10% is not, I think we can do more based on what I've seen you guys do in previous sprints. So ultimately they created a sprint goal that was to elevate or to raise the loading speed or lower the raise, whatever, make it more efficient by 20%. And that's how they started working with. This is the goal that we have, the product backlog. It's the product goal was to have a proper smooth experience, a seamless experience for the stakeholders, for the users of the dashboard to gather all the information that they would require for them to do their business. But the first thing that was hampering them the most was the loading speed of the dashboard. So they defined, this is the product goal that we have, this is what we're trying to achieve overall, and this is what is going to help us get there fastest. And I think that's the closest that I've ever been to this, into the situation described in this question. And I hope this helps a bit.
Great, thank you. Someone asked a pretty broad general question, but I'm sure others are wondering too. Do you want to share some of your experiences working with product owners? I'm assuming this is from the Scrum Master perspective, but if it is not, please clarify this, Victor.
Some experience of me working with product owners, there are so many, really depends on the person, on the way that they have been empowered by the organization.
Right.
I think out of all the product owners that I've ever worked with, there was only one that was completely empowered, has been described in the growth of a product owner as in the PSPO material. So he would be accountable and responsible and empowered to make decisions on everything back from beginning to end, and complete budget decisions. And he would not be able, you would not need to have physical sign-offs or any budget requests or whatever. He was the only one who could do whatever he wanted with the product. And he had a good relationship with the team that took him years to build. Other than that, I've seen product owners struggle, even though they were they had the best characters in the world. I've seen other product owners who were sort of new to the game and were more of a project manager, and we're struggling to wrap their heads around how do we create such an empirical approach to things, and how do we inspect and adapt based on emergent insights. So it really depends on the person, the culture set by the company, the way that companies empower product owners. Because what I often see is that even though we have now chosen to do Scrum, organizations do not necessarily understand the complete implications for the organization itself. So they don't think about what do we need to change in our organization, for instance, in decision-making power for product owners, and what do we need to change for that. So it really depends.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any ideas for getting people more engaged in a virtual setting?
No.
No, we've been in this very fully virtual world for a while now, but I think this is still something that teams struggle with.
Yeah, and I think the key word here is teams and how they want to work. I've seen so many organizations say, well, you have to come into the office 2 days a week and you have to work virtual 2 days a week. But this is something that you want to put to the teams. How do we want to work together? Because maybe my team enjoys working physically, while your team over at Scrum.org might benefit a lot more from doing virtual stuff. And maybe they are more comfortable talking to each other just with their cameras turned off. Personally, that's not for me. I like to see people's faces because that gives me feedback as well on how people feel, how engaged they are, and so on. But again, that really depends. I've worked with this organization, that really large organization over here in the Netherlands that make conductor fabrication machines. And those were very introverted people, like a lot of them. And then when the pandemic hit, they were super happy that they just could work from home and they wouldn't have to talk to people. And they thrived on that. The quality of their work just skyrocketed. So it really depends, but bring this to your team. How do we want to work together? How do you think we should work on this situation? This has a lot to do with self-management as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely something people still struggle with. So this question is kind of an organization type of question. What suggestions do you have for working in a large organization that has waterfall initiatives and timelines, but an agile team? The initiative or the initial, I'm assuming you meant, expectations are for the agile team to complete dev work early, but they don't plan on providing test data and testing for a couple of months.
Yeah, so this feels always like a little bit of a facade way of doing agile.
Mm-hmm.
Like a team is expected to do agile, um, but the environment doesn't change, and therefore you create a massive dependency in flow. So the team, if they would be empowered, and the organization around them, the environment around them would actually change with them, the output could be so much better than when trying to fight the waterfall approach. I mean, when it comes to deadlines, deadlines will always exist, right? There will always be something, some point that we want to aim towards. And deadline, by the way, is a funny term anyway, because who's going to die when you don't make that deadline? Having said that, it challenge the organization back on what do you expect of us as an agile team, as a Scrum team, if the environment does not work with us. You're creating more impediments for us to work against than that you're allowing us to actually deliver something that's of value. And what do you expect is going to be the output? Are we now a glorified feature factory because we cannot do the actual testing? Or do you really want to get something out of this? I think that would be my main thing to start off with. And I do appreciate that this is a very tricky fact, but you're setting yourself up as an organization for failure if you expect just a Scrum team or an Agile team to be agile, while the rest is still agile like a rock.
Right. What are some things that this person who asked this question could do to try to convince their organization that this is not the best way to work?
Convince the organization that agile is not the best way to work, or
No, that the waterfall kind of facade of agile way is not the best way to work. What are some ways that people can kind of convince or prove that agile is the way that this should be working?
I always like to list all the dependencies that are in place, or the variables, if you will, that we need to take into account, and how predictable that they are. And the less predictable that they are, the more of a flexible approach that we need. So if you have more of a waterfall approach that's more rigid, that just renders us unable to actually effectively work and create work that is valuable, and therefore we are creating more fluff and organizational waste than when we wouldn't have the ability to pivot based on the emergent insights. And it has a lot to do with that, but also think about what is the issue that we're trying to fix? What's the problem that we have as an organization? And what's the best approach that we can try to tackle this? Because I see many organizations implement Scrum or Agile or whatever framework that you want to use because it's being mentioned on LinkedIn, or because my neighbor says they're doing Scrum or whatsoever, but not thinking about what kind of issue are we really trying to solve here? What options do we have that might help us remove that? So, and if we think Scrum is going to be one of those frameworks that's going to help us remove or get to a better state, what kind of changes do we need to make? Are we going to create a waterfall situation or a hybrid situation with waterfall and Scrum? How are we going to do this as optimal as possible? And what kind of changes do we need to make in the organization, whether that's structure, hierarchy, ways of working, culture, and so on. But I think that's a predominant question that you should be asking yourself as an organization. What changes do we need to make, and how do we effectively set us up for success?
That's great. Thank you. This question here, it starts with true or false, but should management be excluded from the retrospectives so that the team has open and honest discussions and a safe environment is created for this discussion? Are there circumstances, I'm adding on with my own question here, are there circumstances where you would want the management to be a part of a retrospective? What's your take on this question?
So, true or false? It depends. There's a little bit in between. So there's a little gray area. Scrum Guide says the retrospective is for the Scrum team itself to inspect itself. And I think there was a little bit of we had a nice discussion on this with a couple of PSTs a couple of weeks ago as well. Should we or could we get management on board? Personally, and the Scrum doesn't say anything about this, but this is my personal perspective. If the relationship with management or leadership would improve, and therefore the ability for the Scrum team to deliver value would improve, you could invite them. Maybe for a little part of that sprint retrospective. And again, the time box for the sprint retrospective is 3 hours. So you have a lot of time to discuss stuff. Invite them for a specific part, whether that's leadership or any other person or group of people that you're working with, in order to improve your ways of effectivity as well as your ability to deliver quality stuff. And then maybe dismantle again and go back in your Scrum team itself. But it has a lot to do with levels of psychological safety as well. If you do not feel confident that you can speak up when other people are present or when management is present, then how transparent can you be? In other words, how can you effectively inspect and adapt if you are not able to be transparent about anything and everything in order to improve the situation? So coming back to the question, could management be part of it? Yes, based on invitation. Not if they say, well, I have some really important observations and I think it's going to make you more effective, so I'm joining your sprint retrospective. No, just based on invitation, because that supports self-management.
That makes sense.
Okay. I'm glad that makes sense.
I'm glad too. So this question from Tulu, we only have time for maybe a couple more questions, maybe one or two. What is the best way to effectively manage multiple Scrum teams at the same time, and how can a Scrum Master manage their commitments for these teams?
Well, you don't, because as a Scrum Master, you do not manage Scrum teams. Else you would be a project manager or a team manager. Now, having said that, you could see a Scrum Master as a management position in the sense that you manage the Scrum framework. So go. But you can, as a Scrum Master, you can oversee the whole and how to optimize the way that Scrum teams are working together. If this is a scaled effort, so you're working on the same product with all those teams together, ensure that there's going to be only one product owner, ensure that there's only going to be one product backlog where all these teams pick from. Ensure that they discuss things together so there's transparency on the whole effort of delivery. But you do not manage the Scrum team. This is for all the Scrum teams and all together to inspect themselves, to inspect the ways that they work together, how they deliver their product. And therefore, there's only one definition of done. But have them figure out their own solutions and support that discovery and that ability to self-manage, because else they'll just be executing your solutions instead of growing by the nature of their own discoveries. I hope this helps a bit.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question here. So this question from Olaf that just came in, is the Scrum Master supposed to work with stakeholders, or does the Scrum Master totally leave that up to the product owner?
It depends. Because as a Scrum Master, you are accountable for guiding and working with your product owner as well. And if you have, let's say you are an experienced Scrum Master and you have an inexperienced product owner, for instance, you can help them get up to speed on how they should effectively collaborate. How do the stakeholders engage with the product owner or vice versa in order to get a healthy product backlog state or to drive the emergent insights, or how the voice of the stakeholders is very important. So the other day I was teaching an APS class in London, and there was a question as well, like, we are so disconnected from our stakeholders. What do we do? And I found out that this was a team that sort of had a product owner, but not very explicitly, but they definitely did not have a Scrum Master. And this is where a Scrum Master would come in, overlooking the whole perspective. Okay, we're doing Scrum, we have the Scrum framework in place, at least we made the decision, but we're not engaging with our stakeholders. You, dear product owner, are accountable for maximizing the value of the product, how can you do that without actually engaging with our stakeholders? So let's figure out a way, a strategy, how to get this more up to speed and into place. So that is how you could, as a stakeholder or as a Scrum Master, work with stakeholders as well.
Okay, great. So I don't think we have any more time for questions. In case you didn't notice, we tried to move through as many as we could, as quickly as we could.
No, we covered 22, not too bad.
We covered 22. So we do have 53 open questions. I'm going to share these with Sander to figure out a way, and we'll figure out a way to address these in another way after this session. And a heads up that, again, that the recording of this will be made available within 24 hours. And I'm going to just share my screen again really quick.
If I can interrupt a little bit quickly in
Go
between,
ahead.
maybe if you have more questions and you want to challenge the community on this, feel free. And I'm going to drop the link again to the Mastering Agility Discord community. Link dropped in the chat. It's a growing community. It's a group of pretty cool people. Hundreds in there currently, but feel free to use that and to ask any questions in there too.
Yes, that is a great place to ask your questions. Something that I did want to mention here quick is that we do have a bunch of learning paths on the Scrum.org website. So please feel free to check those out. We have them geared toward product owners, developers, Scrum Masters, and leaders, a bunch of self-learning resources to help you on your learning journey. So please go ahead and check those out. And please stay connected with the Scrum.org community. And we have a forum of our own as well. So feel free to pose any questions in there. That's a great way to connect with other Scrum practitioners. And please stay connected with us on our social media channels. And we also have our blog with some great insights from our professional Scrum trainers like Sander. He has quite a few blogs on there that are quite interesting. And we also have our Scrum Pulse webcasts that we run on a bi-monthly basis. So please feel free to check those out at scrum.org/webcast. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you especially to you, Sander, for sitting in the hot seat and answering questions from the audience. And I hope this was a great use of everybody's time. And thank you all, and Scrum on.
I love being here. Thank you very much for having me, Lindsay. And thank you guys for the awesome questions. Loved it.
Take care, everyone.